Ah, Windows Vista. My favorite version of Windows, the quote-unquote love interest of half of the tech-interested youth, and at the time of its release, considered one of the worst versions of Windows to have been made. How did this happen? Have you ever wondered how Windows Vista got to where it was? Because it had a development period that was like nothing else, and for several years after Windows XP's release, it was the flagship release of Microsoft Windows. Well, that's what this slightly different video is going to be. The start of a series of videos that goes a bit deeper into Windows Vista's development. Now, before we actually begin, I want to provide a bit of context. Windows Vista was released to the general public in 2007, a bit after 5 years after Windows XP was released to the general public, and its development period can generally be split into two different sections: pre-reset and post-reset. The initial development was particularly kind of complicated, hence why the development was reset, and there were a lot of things that were in Windows Longhorn that were intended for its successor, which was codenamed Blackcomb. This video will generally go over the third milestone of quote-unquote Windows Longhorn, which evolved into Windows Vista over the span of several years, and this video in particular looks at the Milestone 3 builds. To set the scene, Windows Longhorn's initial development was particularly kind of calm. No leaks for a period of time. There were screenshots in August of 2002, however the legitimacy of these seems to be disputed, so let's not open that can of worms. The first build of Windows Longhorn to leak was build 3683, which leaked in November of 2002 and was compiled in September of that year. It is the first build of Windows Longhorn to be publicly available, and has a time bomb of September of 2003. Now, one thing I will mention is that in this particular episode, we are not going to be looking at either the startup screen or the setup, because at this point in time, there had not been any changes made to the setup, at least on the surface, though a new setup system was in the works. Furthermore, the startup screen is essentially almost identical to that of Windows XP, barring this small change, I think, that shows the copyright date having been updated. Now, before I go into the actual build, I want to mention that the footage that you're going to be seeing is footage that I got inside of a virtual machine, particularly VMware, since these builds are particularly difficult to install. In fact, I had to use a build of Nanami OS as like a safety net of sorts, just to be able to get into the BIOS so I could set the date correctly, because as I mentioned, you can't set this to the present day. It won't work. As such, I'm also capturing this footage in OBS Studio, which I should mention I have had a bit of a bad time with in the past, particularly with the Windows Home Server 2011 video, but hopefully that doesn't stop this video from becoming a reality. Though I didn't properly get footage caught this way, I should mention that there is a new logon screen. It's fairly similar to that of Windows XP, however with a different color scheme, with this silver part in the middle with a dark bluish gray on the tops and bottoms, and there's also a clock in the top right corner. On the actual desktop, from the get-go, it's pretty easy to see that there is a new wallpaper and a new visual theme known as Plex. I should mention here that Plex was only intended to be a placeholder theme until the final theme could be decided on. It also is fairly similar to XP, but it already has quite a few changes. One of these changes is the sidebar, which I should mention glitched out when I changed the display, for whatever reason. As in, I changed the display resolution and it glitched out. Not sure what's up with that. We can also turn it on and off, which it is possible to do this through the taskbar and start menu settings. We can add a variety of tiles, which we'll get to a few more in a little bit, but out of the box, we have different tiles such as the clock. Another thing we have here is a demonstration of Avalon, a new framework thing that was in development for Windows Longhorn. You can see it in action here with this redesigned display properties window for control panel. Some of these items do not work properly, and some of them are, well, to put it simply, placeholders. What is also accessible is the classic display properties that were in older versions of Windows, such as 98, 2000, and XP. Most of the out-of-the-box wallpapers remain essentially unchanged, and I'm going to go with the Stonehenge one for this build. Another thing that we have is a already starting to get redesigned Windows Explorer. There's a slightly different sidebar, and we have a preview pane which was not in Windows XP. We can also apparently create a photo album or playlist with this wizard thingy, which provides a thing telling us we can provide it with a name and add files to it, among other things. It also apparently thinks it's a playlist. There's also a new open file dialog in here, which isn't seen here. You can access this via Internet Explorer, which we'll get to just a little later, because if we look at my computer, the hard disk drives has a new space indicator, and you can see that the icons on the preview pane are slightly animated. In my documents, we have a new welcome pane, and I will say this, the panes for my pictures and my music are a tinge buggy, but, well, do bear in mind this was a particularly early build. A new message introducing you to the briefcase shows up when you initially create a briefcase, and I'll generally summarize Explorer. We have the My Hardware window, which was, to put it simply, a bit of a precursor to what eventually became devices and printers. Anyway, going back to that new file open dialog, here it is. It seems to bear quite a fair resemblance to what we actually got in Windows Vista with the then new file dialog, at least in some form. Also, Internet Explorer has been updated to 6.05. This is what Outlook Express looks like at this time. I don't think there's a lot, if not any, differences with this, but here you go anyway. We also have new WinFS functions that are particularly kind of bare bones in this build, as well as a desktop manager which allows us to view or use multiple desktops. I've heard it's a bit buggy, but I don't seem to be having any problems with it here. That was where I was initially going to end the footage, and so I shut down, which gives you this view of the shutdown screen and login screen. However, there's still more stuff that I want to show with this build. Particularly, there's a GDF thingy involving games, which is a bit interesting. And if you didn't look at the sidebar already, you can notice that there are two new different tiles that seem to be a digital clock and a people tile. These are things that are activated via the registry, and we'll get to them in a little bit. There's also a new file conflict resolving dialog, which you can see right here. This is what the people tile thingy looks like. There's a window here. There's a very unimplemented contact manager here. Which breaks Windows Explorer, and for whatever reason there's a control panel item that says portable audio devices for whatever reason. That is overall all of the stuff I found with build 3683, so now we're going to move on to 3706. Oh yeah, this video is not going to be very short, so if you haven't already, feel free to grab some popcorn. On the desktop, from straight out of the box, you'll notice that there's a new wallpaper and that the taskbar has a slightly darker shade of blue. The taskbar is now also included as part of the sidebar. There isn't at the moment a way to change it back. I tried to find one, but it just went really goofy. And the fact that some context menus don't properly close also makes it a bit difficult to, So no sidebar for this build. It was at this point that I realized that that you see these things on the pane, they don't do anything for whatever reason. I assume that these would have probably been implemented as dedicated buttons. However, this never happened. WinFS has had a few more implementations in this build. We can now use it a tinge. Unlike 3683, there is an unimplemented download manager. We have the Windows Trust Manager, which was actually implemented in 3683, but I couldn't find a way to access it in 3683, so that's why we're covering it now. This seems to be this program might be harmful, be careful, kind of similar to user account control in what would become the final product. This leads me straight to the next thing that I want to cover, which is this My TV app thing, which is only usable in this build. I'm assuming this likely would have been, if this was actually developed into a feature, it likely would have been a way for you to, like, watch TV on your computer, which actually was possible with Windows 7. Apparently that's according to what Nanami Midobe says in this wallpaper. One of these things doesn't work, and another one of these things just, I can't even click it. If we do a bit of registry magic, we can bring back that file conflict dialog from the previous build, which I should mention is in the previous build a registry thing. This D word can be used to bring back the original older display control panel, which at times like this could be particularly handy when the thing is not acting appropriate. And last of all, let's try to get autoplay working, because there's a new autoplay system in this build as well. First up, how do we access it? My first idea was to use a computer program like Office 2003, but that didn't work. But then I remembered I had an old disk image lying around from a old video that I hadn't gotten the content for prepared in time, that video being my macOS 10.6 and 2023 video. Just to give you an idea of how old that is, that was recorded in like July of 2023. But that's generally about it. So I suppose we should probably move on to the last build that this video will go into, which is build 3718. This time, we have the sidebar enabled out of the box, with some tiles too. We also have a new taskbar design, which would later be the default in later builds. A change is that the program installer icon that was apparently in 3706, this program list tile, was removed. With the new taskbar, icons are now centered. Now we have a new task pane, which makes it impossible to access System 32 contents through conventional means or access older control panel options. Oh, surely I don't think anyone would need those now, would they? The My Hardware window has been improved, though, so that's good, I guess. There is a new picture and video library, which I'm going to guess is based off of WinFS. That file open dialog from 3683's Internet Explorer is in a few more places now, like Notepad. I also heard that apparently ClearType is supposed to be enabled in one of these builds by default, so I turn it on here. Here's the Trust Manager. It apparently appears larger. Here's your proof that the My TV app does not work anymore. We have some new tiles to the sidebar, and overall that's generally going to be about it for build 3718. Overall, from this point in time, which is the earliest we have of Windows Vista's development, changes were already being made, and they were already starting to see some problems. Not as many as there would be later in the quote-unquote pre-reset time frame, but still some slightly small problems. Oh, and one more thing before I go. Assuming you celebrate it, I hope you have a Merry Christmas.